Good everything. Happy whatever you celebrate. Happy family, happy love, happy
Yeah.
joy. Hey, Dr. Carr. Good
Hey,
morning.
Professor Hunter, I'm so glad to see you. I love you, my friend. It's so good to see you this morning.
Oh man. Yeah, we were just
This
talking.
evening, wherever we are. It's already Christmas Eve somewhere in the world.
Is
Maybe
it
Bethlehem. Yes,
who
yeah, they
who
say it out
celebrates
there.
this besides this place?
What you
Who
mean?
who celebrates Christmas?
Well, I mean, they beefing in Jerusalem, so I'm sure that what was it that Yates the
Are they
poet.
gonna take a break for Jesus?
Oh, well, I mean, Jesus was a Jew after all, but a Palestinian Jew, according to most. So I suppose the great ironies of wishing people happy holidays while people are being killed, particularly children. A lot of babies have died. So I guess the answer to that would be no. Shout out to Linda Thompson Greenfield and her master, Anthony Blinken, and his master, Joe Biden, for showing the weakest possible support for nothing at the UN yesterday. You know, what must it be to be a diversity hire at the UN? And yes, you are a diversity hire, Ambassador Thompson. And to just abstain is the best you can do. How do you sleep at night? So yeah, I guess I think it was Yeats, William Butler Yeats, one of those poems where he writes, you know, what beast is this that sloughs toward Bethlehem to be born? Today, I guess they're saying Merry Christmas somewhere in Bethlehem, or certainly East Jerusalem is under siege. So, and I guess it's Christmas Eve over there, right? So,
Yeah, you're touching on
what
what
is
is our responsibility when we get into these places, because I see it a lot, right? You see it a lot, probably some of your colleagues, whether it's a venerable position at a university, a presidency at an Ivy League, or a corporate C-suite, adjacent position. We get there, we're the first of our kind to
yes,
be in these positions, and so we have to not embarrass the tribe. At the same time, we have to let the white folk know how brilliant we are, and how much we are, just like them, and that we are worthy of that position that they've given us, and so therefore we have to walk in lockstep with all of the things that is
yeah,
expected of us. So I think about this often. Being somebody that has been in seats and spaces, and
yes,
I've I think I was confused, Dr. Carr, because I felt like I was there to to break the thing open. I always thought when I got someplace that my job was to bring more people.
oh,
Yeah. I always thought, okay, let me be the best version of myself, but let me be all of myself so that these people never get confused about what it is to be both excellent and black, which usually is synonymous, right? So I'm gonna show you, I'm not gonna act like you. But yeah, and then the first time I paid dearly for it, I realized, oh, I'm gonna double down, because we both kind of stubborn like that. And
yes.
what you're not gonna do is tell me what I can't do. So now I'm gonna double down on all of the things, and maybe even swing the pendulum into ignorance a little bit.
Right.
And by that I don't mean lack of knowledge. I mean how I act. But I wonder, you get those good positions, and aren't you supposed to do what they tell you to do?
Yeah. And I guess it depends on when you get the position. I mean, we know that. I mean, you know, we've talked extensively about Ralph Bunche. I mean, Bunche was present at the birth of the UN, and he becomes arguably the most, what was it, Carr called him the most indispensable man. And he did everything he could. I mean, here's a guy from Detroit who grew up out there on the West Coast, went to UCLA, taught for years on Howard University's faculty, was there at the birth of the OSS and all the intelligence services, State Department. Then they recruit him to the UN. He is the US's man at the UN. That social structure has its agenda, but Bunche has an agenda, and at the heart of his agenda was decolonization. He wants self-determining and but within that framework, there was a job that he was sent there to do. And my man Charles Henry out there, UCal Berkeley, retired now, former president of the National Council of Black Studies. Charles Henry wrote a whole book on it. He says, is he a representative Negro or is he an American other? To me, when we talk about this African States framework, social structure, who we the other people, and governance, who are we to each other, that's where the crux of the issue is. Bunche did, I am convinced, as much as he thought he could do. And he still, what was it? I think Amiri Baraka once said, you can't eat Ralph Bunche. Meaning what? Yeah, you can put him in every magazine. You can talk about he's a great, but you can't eat him for dinner. Meaning what? How does that free us? How does that help us? And so you can't eat Oprah for dinner. You can't eat LeBron James for dinner. You can't eat, TD Jakes or Diddy for dinner. I mean,
I mean, want to eat either one of them for dinner.
Well, no, even they might eat each other.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, but we, it's so funny. Yesterday's New York Times had an article about social media and how Black and they say it has Hispanic or Latino teenagers and younger are consuming social media so much more than white teenagers, which we knew. But the younger you go, the more time they spend on it. And they said the average Black child spends about 12 minutes a day reading. And then they go through, and I'm saying that all these people watching YouTube and watch the stuff that's just completely irrelevant to our liberation, but are consumed with, and of course it's driving the Skip Baylesses and other people of the world crazy because all these athletes have podcasts, and so which is intriguing to hear them talk about sports because they actually hear Rasheed Wallace or Agent Zero. But I'm saying all that to say that we are consumed with that stuff. Meanwhile, people are dying. The lakes are drying up. Long article about the former Soviet Union, all the inland oceans that are drying up, a place that was 15% bigger than Lake Michigan, now a desert. All these people, the UN, they just came back from Doha talking about, from UAE saying the world is getting ready to end, these island nations, we about to drown. And meanwhile, our distractions are killing us. And on Christmas Day, they're going to make the 150 millionth, I think, remake of The Color Purple comes out. Christmas Day. No, wait, I'm sorry. 151 millions remake of, and it's like, what are we doing? What are we doing? And the answer to that is real simple. We're pouring clean glasses of water, and more people are coming and drinking them and finding each other who are pouring clean glasses, and we continue to build. We don't get distracted.
Can I ask you, and I see you looking around, it makes me smile, because I know you're looking for a book.
Yeah,
you have the book. You have the Bunch book somewhere. You have that. And I was like, yes.
I don't need it.
I got up this morning. I'm reading finishing Baby of the Family because Tina McElroy Answer is going to be in community with us. So I want to make sure I honor her. I want to get my book signed. I'm going to sit with her. We're going to figure out how we're going to digitize that and do an audio version. We're going to bring, I've been talking with Daniel Black. He's working on The Second Coming. And I'm back into publishing now. I'm telling you, I'm consumed with this thing. And the question is coming up. How do we get people to read? Because, there's a lot of books on the bestsellers list that maybe sold a couple of thousand copies. So just so you know, that has nothing to do with your massive amount of sales. So I said, you have to build the appetite, right?
Yes.
I've been talking with some amazing people in publishing. You have to build the appetite. I had a conversation with Tiffany Aliche, the Budgetnista, who used to be a preschool teacher, and I can't stop talking about her because she intentionally taught preschool, because she said, I want to make sure that 4-year-olds in Newark, where she was in the heart of Newark, in the worst parts of Newark, know how to read, because I don't know what they're going to face after this. But at least if these 4-year-old babies have the foundation of knowing how to read, they have a fighting chance.
Yes.
And so it was her commitment to not teach any other grade, but to hit it at the apex. What is the responsibility of parents to take the devices out of the hands of children? I know it's convenient to put the device in front of them and have all manner of, whether it's Doc McStuffins. I think there's a lot of cute stuff out there. But you're training them in a habit that is going to be hard to break. And we've seen teenagers want to fight their parents and hurt their parents who punish them by taking away their devices. It's that deep, right? But at a young age, you have control. You're the parent, right? You're the parent. I mean, the kid got to do what you tell them to do. You're the one. So what is the responsibility? And then shout out to all of the teachers, especially you preschool teachers, especially you kindergarten teachers, because you're the ones laying the foundation educationally to develop the desire. How do we do that? Because that's going to be my challenge as I voice myself back into a space that I feel needs somebody with a due north. That's not just here for like, is this going to sell? Let me go find somebody with a reality show and or an influencer. Let me give them a book deal, even if they can't read, because that's the model right now, y'all. That's y'all right. Reading books from people who can't read,
who cannot read, and who did not write the book.
And
And
that's
maybe
fine. You know, I mean, I may need a ghostwriter at some point,
no,
but
no, no,
like,
not a ghost. I'm not talking about a ghostwriter. I'm talking about because Dick Gregory. I mean, for months he would come up to Founders Library, and I'd offer to meet him anywhere, and he'd be like, no, 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 I want to come, drive his little 2-seater silver Benz right up to the front of the library and park like the whole place was his. Nobody bothered him, and me and him would just sit and talk. And what he was doing was thinking out loud, downloading his mental computer. And when his final book came out, that book was written with a ghost. Well, I don't even call it a ghostwriter, a collaborator,
right.
I suppose. Right.
And
And
extract.
right, exactly. But I had teed him up for it because he was rehearsing those things, and then at the end, when Christian, his son, one of his children, Dr. Christian Gregory, was like, hey man, will you write the foreword? I said, it'll be an honor to do that, because, and I just told that story a little bit. I guess what I'm saying is collaborator is one thing, but when you're reading something by somebody who you didn't have anything to do in the collaboration process, to me, I don't know. See, I'm speaking out of ignorance though. Is that a different thing? I probably you've done this.
Yes, no, I've done it 30 times. So
that's what I'm saying, and done it well. But so what's the difference?
The difference is, and I'll just sitting with somebody who's 26, who hasn't lived his full life, but who has a brain and has had experience. I'm talking about LL Cool J, who actually thinks deeply about things and has read books. And so when you're sitting there extracting concepts and ideas and working on chapters, and then he goes back and rereads everything and then remixes it because he's like, that's not quite, let's do this. That's a collaboration versus, should I name names? No, I'm not going to do that this morning. But versus somebody who had a very limited experience, doesn't read any books, is very insulated in their own wealth and power in this celebrity space, who can't put together two thoughts. And then you're having to create a story out of whole cloth and build around bits and pieces of fragments and talk to 11 other people about their life so that you can piece together something. And it still works because some people good at what they do.
Very good at it. Right.
Yeah. But that's a hard job. I don't want that job anymore. I never want wealth and power in this. So okay. All right. I don't know how that happened. But this it's completely different. Two different things.
So that's, I mean, we're living in an age of celebrity. And what happens? That's the original question you ask. I mean, what happens when you get to a place and you're supposed to be there as a result of the struggle of a larger group? So you're supposed to, or at least the ideas you're supposed to represent. The United Nations right now is a great example.
I want to answer the other question, because I know there's a lot of parents here. I know there's a lot of devices that are going to be given out Monday. I know there's a lot like.
Oh, that's true.
As we head into a new year, what advice as a avid reader who came into reading through comic books?
Yes.
How do we build the appetite for our babies? How do we build an appetite for ourselves even? Because I know it can be overwhelming for somebody who may not have read a book in 20 years. And there's no indictment and no judgment. It's the way society is formed for you not to read. But that is where your freedom will be found. I promise you, the more you know, and not just watching some things on YouTube. We do these classes not to give you full meals, but breadcrumbs so that you can then go and find the books and the footnotes that will then lead you to other books that will then broaden your perspective on whatever topic it is we're talking about. This ain't the topic. Just like I say, the clips on YouTube, those are clips. It's not the meal. It's not the meal.
Well, and to model our conversations, informed conversations are models. Well, I think we both would agree, all of us would agree who are readers, that it can't be done quickly. We're not talking about skimmers or information gatherers. In fact, that's a dead end. AI is about to replace all of that. So it's not labor, it's the process of cultivating your mind. And as you talk about parents and adults, it's funny, on the way to the reparations bill signing on Tuesday, I stopped in Moynihan train station to pick up a New York Times, because I had to leave too early the previous morning, early Tuesday morning, to get to New York. So my paper was here, but by the time they delivered it, I was already probably in Philly. So I stopped, and as I was buying the paper, I saw they had the FT, Financial Times, so I got a copy of that. Now I'm wasting money, but I had to have paper in my hand. That's just so as I'm standing there, these sisters, and it ain't nothing but our people working in all of those places in those kind of jobs. So they're in the Faber or whatever the place was, in selling the newspaper, and they are talking about their grandbabies with these devices. So I'm listening to them as I'm waiting in line, and the one sister said, I don't like my grandbaby having this device all the time. I told her mother, don't put that damn phone in her. Every time I try to call her, she on the phone or she on the tablet or she on the, I don't like that. It's just too many videos. So and then as I got there to get ready to pay, I said, well, I'm gonna tell you, sis, I'm a teacher, and I see it all the time. I see it with the teenagers and the 20-somethings. And she said, I know, it's just what happened. But see, these women and me, we're around the same age. I put them in there maybe mid to late 40s. I'm in my late 50s. So we're in the same generation. We didn't grow up with those devices, what I'm saying. Their children, this is the age of noise, because we're the generation where we remember when there wasn't no Walkman and there wasn't no earphones. Now it's inside their ears. It's not even over their ears. And the children will never know. So when we talk about the parents, I think it's going to take the elders, not even the parents. It's going to take the grandparents. It's going to take the elders and say, look, I'm not trying to replace anything that you have, but I'm going to introduce another element that requires analog. We're going to sit and read, and not just I'm reading with you, you're reading with me. I was in Barnes Noble's near Museum Row on Tuesday, and I saw this lady with her little son curled up in the rocking chair in Barnes Noble's on the second floor over there near Amsterdam Avenue, and they reading a Spider-Man graphic novel. And the child probably he was walking age, but I put him maybe 3-4 years old. But it was quiet. They rocking. They got a space to read. And I'm saying that's what you have to do. You got to cultivate a culture. And once you've done it, the child will take it. But if they've never seen it, well, just finished grading papers. I must have had maybe a dozen AI generated papers that were so terrible that, only the grace of somebody's praying grandmother stopped me from failing students, because I know that there's a dimension of that where as much as I talk, as much as we model, as much as I revise and review, it still doesn't, what's not penetrating is that's not the way to do it, because you haven't seen it. So what we're doing Saturday after Saturday, what we're doing every day in Knarrative and Nubia, what we're doing when we do those slow reads of texts in office hours, we're also modeling for some people who've never seen it. Monday night, we're coming in talking very specifically about passages from the college-bred community that Du Bois wrote, and somebody came in from the week before and talking about these Du Bois speeches. We're talking about language. We're wrestling with words and language. I mean, that's how you teach your students how to write, right? You got to learn how to read. you don't just start with writing, right? I mean, people, because I think that's what we do. We model it week after week after week, and as people get it, they move forward, and we just do it until we get to scale. That's
I
all.
appreciate that. I wanted to be very judgy, and Tiffany Aliche just stopped me in my tracks, and I've had to post a video because
Yes,
when the Honey Bun Story, because she was like, "How you sending your baby to school every day with a honey bun? She bouncing off the walls. I gotta deal with, anybody have to deal with 4-year-olds hopped up on sugar. You already know." And she was like, "This is not." So she said, "Sis, why you getting a baby?" And she came to it in love, and then she didn't realize that the mom thought that she was giving her child something healthy. She said, "Well, there's honey in it, Miss Tiffany." So
well, that's what the labels say.
Right. And then she realized food desert, no good food. And you can say, well, don't you see what vegetables, no, if this is your world,
Right.
and you're in trauma because it's poverty or whatever, you can't look up to even see what the possibilities are until somebody
Watch this, Prof. What about the parents who give their children a little bit of money to go to school to supplement whatever they're going to get at lunch? And right across from the school, this is the story in Philly. This is what I found out real keen when I started working for the school district. Right across the street from the elementary school, and half these kids getting on the train. They're not on a bus, so they are unpoliced. Who has set up a little pop and pop shop right across the street? It's the proprietor, and them kids going and take that money and buy. In Philly, they call them quarter waters. Them little plastic. But the parent has no idea that the child is basically consuming a drug before he or she goes into it. And so the parent don't even know. I gave you $3. You bought some nail laters, a quarter water, and some wrap snacks, and a couple of sugar pixie sticks or whatever you call. And now you in there straight hyped up, and the teachers are the one. Look, we were laughing at that the other day. Abbott Elementary, no, that's just a symbolic gesture. You would weep real tears if you saw what was behind Abbott Elementary, what Joyce Abbott did. You know what I'm saying? And it's getting worse because our children are unsupervised.
Right.
There's something happens between when they leave the house. The first time I saw a child unsupervised, when I moved to Philadelphia from Columbus after I came to Temple, and I'm on the train, and I saw a child that couldn't have been no more than 6, 7 years old with his little backpack on it. And I kept looking around for the parents, and I realized these kids come to school by themselves. There's no chain of custody. You know what I'm saying? I mean, the parents probably working or whoever knows what, but you putting children on the train. Once I saw that, I could never unsee it again. So some of what Tiffany's talking about, this is where our chains of custody have been disrupted.
Right.
Our communities don't have, you can't walk to school, no, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Of course, you talk about candy, wouldn't you? I
did. I so much so that I know that the Swedish fish, they done changed the recipe. It ain't the same.
What, you said they changed the recipe?
They done changed the recipe. That Swedish fish that I used to have is not the same as these children. It's nasty now. I don't know what kind of thing they put in, but back in the day, the Swedish fish were delicious.
Well,
but to your point though, yes. But even back then, there seemed to be like a commitment to the community. Like the person that I bought my Swedish fish from, he also is the person that I bought the newspaper for my teacher, and he also, he kept up with us. It wasn't like anything, it was like, what are y'all doing? The candy was there, but it was also a little bit of, familiar. It was like family, you know what I'm saying? Like there was a responsibility that man had as well to these kids coming in there, and it wasn't just about buying candy, but well,
they putting it. Look, Kathy is here. I see our friend Kathy Adams. She from Philly. She says she was on a train. She's in the Nubia chat. She says she was on the train from age 7. So apparently this ain't no new phenomenon. But Kathy's parents, both of her parents, her father trained at Cheney State Teachers College. Both her parents were teachers. Her mother and her father were teachers. So she had something at home to fortify them. And that's what we're trying. I was talking with Larry on Tuesday. We stand there talking about, this whole project of getting these young people, getting Nia together and doing all that. And so, we have to grapple with the fact that even those of us, and I hope you should talk more about this, because I was listening to this conversation she was having with another sister who went to Howard Law School.
About Larry Daniel Favors of the Larry Daniel Favors show on Sirius XM.
Come on.
The Center for Law and Social Justice at the Great Medgar Evers College. He's the director there. Larry Daniel Favors. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Your lieutenant, your comrade, your sister, our sister. That's exactly right. And they were talking about raising children in this society, and how even when we get to the point where we want everything for our children, we have to balance that with certain experiences that also temper their personalities. I mean, we look at the president of Harvard, Claudine Gay. When you look at the when they did the profile, and I show you this magazine all the time, when she was first appointed back in the summer, can you believe that? Just this summer she was appointed, and they talk about her life story. She did everything right. Raised, the child of immigrants from Haiti, comes here, goes to the schools, busts her tail, goes out to Stanford, perfect record, doing all this, was an RA, got selected for that, then goes off, gets a PhD from Harvard, and now here she is in the bullseye because of, and I looked at the things that they're accusing her of plagiarism. Technically, they are plagiarism. However, there are degrees of plagiarism, so that you, in your acknowledgments, phrase something the same way somebody else phrases it. Jennifer Hochschild, I think, was the scholar that they used. Or in Carol Swain, please. I got all Carol Swain's books. Carol Swain makes some important contributions, but somewhere along the line, Carol Swain lost her way. That's the sister who's a professor emeritus at Vanderbilt University, who the white nationalists have used as a battering ram in spite of her own work. But she says, oh, she stole my whole intellectual thrust. Well, guess what? That is an academic conversation. And I promise you, the 3 people in the world who care, We'll argue about that because the university is dead as a concept. Nobody cares about that. But I'm saying all that to say that, you know, Claudine Gay is the product of a loving family, a loving community. She's come through all this. She's moved to this process, and that will not save you. What's going to save us is having our babies, as you and Tiffany were talking about, having our babies, as Laree was talking about on Tuesday, surrounded by community that says your parents didn't have materially what you have, but you can't mistake your level of comfort with having made it. So your presence in a white space is not an accomplishment for the race. You got to be surrounded by a community that says when you get there, as Anna Julia Cooper said 100 some years ago, when and where I enter, the race enters with me. It's not enough for you to see my face and say, Black people. No, I've got to change policy. I got to move. And on our side, if they mess, I'll never forget Gerald Early telling this story. His auntie, Lois Fernandez and Laura Fernandez, the founders of Odunde in Philadelphia. That's Gerald Early. He was a professor. No, he was a student at University of Pennsylvania at the time. Now he's at Washington University. He said they cheated him out of this competition. I think it was a poetry competition or something like that. Now Penn's in West Philly. The Fernandez is in South Philly. His auntie, Laura, her Yoruba name, she's a priestess. She's an ancestor. Now, both of them ancestors. She was a school teacher, middle school teacher, what we call junior high school. When those sisters found out what they had done to who they call Jerry, their nephew, they went, as we would say, up to the school. Now, these are not, you know what I'm saying? White people going to back up when the governance structure shows itself. Claudine Gay, they came for her. The faculty wrote letters, but how much more powerful would it have been if the women and men that clean up at Harvard, if the women and men who live in Cambridge, who live in the surrounding communities came up there and said, I don't care if you got $100 billion, Mr. Donor, sir, you're not going to have a college if y'all touch a hair on this lady's head. If you bother her again, we're going to have a conversation. But that's how you know that we are estranged from our community.
I was going to say,
you know
what's the relationship? Because if it's you, I already know.
Well, I ain't worried about it. No question.
I'm just saying.
And if it's you, if they mess with you somewhere, your problem going to be with the people who came. No, don't kill them. Please don't kill anyone. No, the only reason we ain't cooked because you, Karen, told us not because we was getting ready to burn the whole studio. No, don't burn the studio. Everybody calm down. I know.
Yeah. So I mean, again, that is our responsibility when we get there, like to know everybody, to be in community with everybody, and not feel like you're sitting on a perch somewhere, right? Like that you made it and somehow you're the magical Negro in the room. No, you have a responsibility when you get in the room.
Look, all the latchkey people are in Nubia. Tracy, Black Karen, talking about how from school to their house, the community was on their porches.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, who gets a key at 8 and 9 to the house and you don't think the neighborhood is watching, but everybody was watching back then.
Everybody watching. Yeah. Everybody. And everybody's talking. It's so funny. I remember many years ago being in Mississippi in a conversation with some elders, and we talking about the civil rights movement. In fact, I may have been the first time. Shout out to my man Akinyele Umoja, who wrote the book "We Will Shoot Back" about an element of this. They were saying they would go to school, Mississippi Valley or Jackson State or wherever, Alcorn in Mississippi, and they would come home, some of these little towns in Mississippi they were living in, and people said, well, were you scared? And they was like, listen, from the time I left the campus at Edabena or Jackson or Alcorn and got back to my little Greenwood or wherever I live, Sunflower County, wherever I was staying, I was safe because do you know how many guns Black people had between the college campus and my little hometown? And when I got back to the house and my grandfather sitting out on the porch with the long rifle, like, okay, you in? All right, well, we can go to bed. In other words, there was never a time when there wasn't no eyes on you. People think of Mississippi like, oh, I'm so terrified. No, you were safer in Mississippi than many other places in the United States because Black people had guns and they weren't going to let nothing happen to their college student children. I mean, it's just amazing to hear us talk. We have to have this governance conversation. We don't abandon our babies. You know what I'm saying?
As we move into our discussion about reparations, and I think it's super important. Yes. I just wanted, as we go into the holidays, just a reminder, we have all of the power in the world to shape the future, because most of us do have people in our lives, children in our lives, and that's where it really starts for me. That's why I've always taught because I feel like that, you know, not just that I believe the children are our future, but like that's where you can have the greatest impact. If you can inspire a young person, they'll never forget. You'll never forget the person that inspired you to want to be whatever, to do whatever. You'll never forget the Mrs. Johnsons. That's the one that comes to mind. Or even I have a Sister Joan that like really, you know, the Catholic school, you know, you will never forget those people that in your neighborhood, Mrs. James across the street that constantly, you know, told you what you could do. Your parents, yes, but they're like, we are part of a community. So I just wanted to be, you know, intentional about, as we, you know, go into this holiday season, you know, can we do something different next year in terms of how we inspire our young people? All of us are responsible.
Absolutely. And by the way, I just love it because in those, and I'll have to pull up the YouTube chat in a minute, but in the Nubia chat, the richness of, well, in education, as we know, many places, they will call it best practices that is coming through in the chat. You know, I was talking about, and she driving all her children back forth to school, and they thought they was missing out because their mama drove them to school every day and brought them back food. I mean, Shanna Sumter asked, the book fair was a big deal. What happened to weekly reader? I mean, the cultures of remember the book fair was something we looked forward to when
Scholastic also showed up with that little bus on the campus.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what? Okay, we're gonna say less because I can probably hear the wheels spinning in your head. At some point, maybe we need to bring that back. We need to have a little bookmobile go through. We're gonna make some pop-ups and show up with the bookmobile. What about that? With some of these books that gonna be pumping out, you know?
Yes, and it can be an adult bookmobile.
Oh, no question.
Not just for the babies. Yeah.
No question. See, people that talk, well, in Claire, and we're not romanticizing as such, although we are in a way, because Claire has mentioned how the crack era is responsible for destroying families and neighborhoods. And everybody wasn't in a situation like this. There were many people who had to navigate a gauntlet getting to school. Everybody didn't have old heads and gangsters and whoever else that wouldn't mess with the children. No, there's a lot of danger out there. And we don't live in the society we lived in. And even in the society we lived in, we know that it was not a perfect society. And there are a lot of people who suffered. So,
but we're planting the seeds to create the world in which we want to live. Like, so right. This is not for me reminiscent as much as it is like forward thinking. Like, what can we do moving forward to create and foment and germinate this kind of sense of community? Because we can do it. So it's just aspirational.
It is aspirational.
Yeah.
And shout out Michelle. Talk about culture meaning making. Michelle Ram said, I did a panel on my quilt dedicated to the book fair with copies of the order form from the 80s. So I mean, like cultural meaning making. You throw that over your child. Make your book a quilt with the, you know. Okay, Charlotte still has it. Kelly Bree says the Hornets have a mascot visit with the bus. They have bookmobiles and book fairs in Charlotte. A lot of people are saying that, you know, what's going on. And we need to be able to know. Oh, Legos. Okay, Logos book fair. Sorry, Alistair. Yeah, Kingston Harbor in Jamaica. So the book fair ain't just yeah, Ken, we're gonna do that.
Yeah.
Scholastic Scope. Yeah, I remember that. Boys Life, Weekly Reader. Those were Boys Life was the I think the Boy Scouts magazine. Now we didn't stay in the Scouts long, but I made my parents put their hard-earned pennies together and keep subscribing to Boys Life. So I used to read Boys Life. Oh man, which is crazy because that also sends a message. It's like those Sunday school materials that had the white Jesus in it, and, you know, imprinted on our minds forever. The white Jesus with that spooky glow around his head and that crown of thorns with a lamb in his under his arm and a bloody heart with some thorns on it on the side knocking on the door. I mean, that's some horror movie stuff when we go back. But you know, the National Baptist Convention, the National Baptist Publishing House was in Nashville, where I grew up. I mean, so that some of that stuff was being pumped out and it was controlled. In fact, I was just talking to a lawyer last week. They just sold the house, the publishing house building, which is in downtown Nashville, because it's completely gentrified. A black group tried to buy the property and the Baptists didn't sell it to them. They sold it to a developer who 5 minutes later literally like a day or two later, flipped it for like $4 million more and they said, we're going to keep the facade because this is historic. No, that's where if y'all went to Sunday school in Black America, odds are the books that you used in your Sunday school came out that building in Nashville. And now it's going to be a boutique hotel or something run by one of these companies, and they're going to have a little plaque out there, and you're going to have some of your people's pictures in the lobby, and it's over. But see, that's not going to happen with us. That's why we're here. Week after week, we're building something different. Well, we're building something back to the
Right. I was gonna say that because it was something different before. We just forgot.
That's right.
So you were in New York? You were in New York on Tuesday?
Yeah, up in your neck and your region of the world, because
I don't even be knowing until you get there. I'm like, oh,
listen,
what?
blame.
Where are you?
We'll blame your sister. We'll blame L. Joy Williams and the Brooklyn NAACP for this, because those black women, let me tell you, they are not playing. They L. Joy reached out last week and said, look, the book, not the book, the signing of this legislation is going to be Tuesday. They were trying to work out where it was going to be. Can you make it? And of course, I was out of town until late Monday. And then, well, not late Monday afternoon. And then, we did office hours, and then I scurried and got to New York. So it was very interesting, because the legislation, the state of New York is the third state after California and Illinois to create a statewide Reparations Commission. And the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, signed the legislation. Before she signed the legislation, there was about an hour program. She spoke for a half hour. And normally that's perfunctory remarks. I sat there, we was like, Luria and them was in front of us. I was sitting next to Nkechi Taifa, who is the long distance reparations struggler, right? We were probably about in the front row was all the elected officials, all the state assembly people, state senators. Got a chance to chop it up in a minute with a school teacher who I got a lot of respect for, who is no longer in the teaching and principal business, but is now in the national legislature, Jamal Bowman. We stand there talking about teaching. So they was in the front row, then the line, then Luria and them was sitting there, and then we were sitting behind them. So we watching at the New York Historical Society. We're watching this conversation, and to see, first of all, the governor spoke for 30 minutes about being from Western New York, growing up in working class, white. And she called it conservative, but we know what that means, and she was very clear about what that means. Exactly. She didn't pull any punches. Talking about her parents. So we didn't have any contact with black people. And she said, then she went to college. She talked about activism and all this kind of thing, trying to establish her bona fides. You got to do that. She's a politician. But then she said, there are a lot of people didn't want this bill. They're going to fight this legislation. It's going to be controversial. It's a reparations study bill, but it's going to be public hearings. It's going to be all kind of people arguing. She said, but it was the right thing to do. We have to create a different society. And then every other speaker who spoke was black. Following her, I think, Al Sharpton talked for a few minutes, but then Andrea Stewart Cousins, I had never seen her in person. The majority leader of the New York State Senate. I mean, you're talking about master politics. So we talking about representatives? Yes. I'm not just in this seat. Now that I have this seat, I'm going to do something different. And then after her, Carl Hastie, who of course is the state assembly speaker. He got up and then he introduced this young sister who is Makale Salages. Her people are Haitian. She's an assemblywoman. She was one of the animating forces behind the bill, but the one that got me was the brother from Queens, State Senator James Sanders. James Sanders spoke, and he talked about Seneca Village. He said right across the street from where we are, it was a black community, and it was an integrated community, and the state of New York took those people's land, and that's where Central Park is. He said, and you know who did it? A Democratic governor, a Democratic assembly head, and a Democratic state senate. He said, but this is a different Democratic party. And he started talking, and I'm saying, if people want to understand why elections matter and why politics matters. Now, people say, we're not going to raise reparations. Everybody calm down. This is not about winning today. This is a long distance struggle. Do you really think that if this room hadn't been packed with all these black and brown legislators, if this young sister, Makale Salages, who talked about Queen Mother Moore and all the people who trained her, and then she is the chair of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian caucus, legislative caucus in the assembly. I mean, she can't be 40 years old. So I'm just saying, I'm looking at this room. New York is not California. It's not Illinois. John Clark used to call New York a multi-ethnic nation, but I would say it's a multinational state. There are a lot of different nations in New York. When you have a reparations conversation in New York, you're not going to be able to put, well, you can't get reparations if your people weren't enslaved here. Really? The sister that got your bill through, people came from Haiti. No, don't go nowhere. Stay in the room. We're going to talk about this. What you're not going to do is throw the rock and then get on social media and let these bot factories and troll factories weaponize this ignorance. New York is going to force a different kind of conversation at a moment when things are falling apart. And by that, I mean the social structures we're living in are falling apart. And here we are in the holiday season, right? We're in the season. We're now in the corridor, right? Around the world, that 7-day corridor that goes between Christmas and New Year's, the 7 days of Kwanzaa, Kwanzaa, which begins in 3 days. So on Monday will be Christmas, and then on Tuesday, Umoja, the first day of Kwanzaa. And I know that at the New York African Burial Ground, my man Jimmy Cleckley and the crew at New York African Burial Ground, they're gonna have a Kwanzaa ceremony. And we know that this is the season. It's the season of Hanukkah. It's the season of Diwali previously. It's the season of Christmas. It's the season of Kwanzaa. It's the holiday season. And as we've talked about here many times, holidays are rituals that bind and create human community. And a disruptive effect of human social structures and science and technology have eviscerated the old rhythms in ways we can't fully see or experience. These young people that we've been talking about, Prof, who, are born into a world, born digital natives, however we want to curate it, they are experiencing a world where everything is perpetually available all the time. There was a time when, and I found myself 3, 4 o'clock in the morning one day last week. It might have been actually coming back from New York. I put on Amazon and watched Candy Cane Lane. Watching Eddie Murphy and Tracy Ellen Ross, David Alan Grier, who is hilarious as Santa Claus. It's like, come on. But my point is this.
Spoiler alert. How you gonna put out the Santa Claus? That was the
wait, I should put it this way. Let me put it this way.
Spoiler alert.
I should have said spoiler alert, but let me just put it this way. The director was Reginald Hudlin. And again, what do you do when you have resources? How do you become representative? How do you represent a community? There's no perfect way to do it. Certainly when you're talking about billions of dollar enterprise like Amazon, but I'll just say this. Don't think about that being an outlying moment in the casting. I don't know how these Negroes figured out they was just gonna have a black movie under the sky, but so anyway, it's not a surprise. In other words, don't be surprised when you see all these black people in this movie. They're supposed to be, anyway. So yes, I'm bringing it up to say this. The irony of a film like that being a movie like that being released on the Amazon platform, of course, is that, when many people here today and who were watching this and who are part of our community were growing up, the propaganda was that this white man was going to come to your house in the middle of the night, come down through whatever point of entry. Most people didn't have chimneys, the front door, whatever, and leave you presents that your parents busted their ass and got on layaway from July. I mean, my man Naeem Akbar used to always talk about that. He told his children, when you get something, I'm Santa Claus. That's black folk, because I ain't giving credit to no white man with a home invasion. But the point is, that's moot now, because the technology has made it so that if you've got $3 and no regard for where it comes from, Santa come to your house every day, Amazon show up. So the idea now that Christmas is a special moment has been disrupted by the science and the technology. It's eviscerated the old rhythms, and we can't fully see that yet. The seasons are blending, not just the physical seasons. And we've talked about the origins of Christmas. It's in our archive. We talked about that, as we know, I'll talk about it today. But I mean, it's very interesting because social identity, community social identity, is a blend. When we talk about that cultural meaning making category in our Africana studies framework, it's a blend of icons, whether it be Santa, or as Ishaka Musa Barashango, Reverend Barashango used to say in a little essay in his book, African People and European Holidays, A Mental Genocide. He had a little section in there called Santa or Satan. But at any rate, I'm gonna leave that alone. I always got a kick out of that little. I would laugh every time I reread that. But the point is that Santa's an icon. Jesus is an icon, a figure of uncritical praise. Whitney Houston is an icon. Donny Hathaway, hang all the mistletoe. That's iconic. Nat Cole, chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Yes, the Christmas song, iconic. Even the song penned by a member of the old Confederacy, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Yeah, Confederate wrote that. But these become iconic moments. So icons are one, shrines are another. Holidays are about shrines. I was talking with a brother the other day. Where was I? Yesterday, actually. One of the security guards, maybe the National Gallery of Art. I was just museum hanging out yesterday for a few hours, trying to clear my head and think about some things. And the brother was talking about taking his children to sit in Santa's lap in Northern Virginia. I didn't ask the brother whether or not the Santa was black because I didn't want to know. And I didn't really care. But the point is, that's a ritual people do. And it used to be a time when the mall was a shrine this time of year. People went to the mall, even if you had no money, but they call it window shopping, right? There are malls. I mean, Rockefeller Center, the skating and the Christmas tree lighting. I mean, what the mummy and them did down there at the White House with their tree, that they become shrines almost. You got to make a pilgrimage to the thing. The Christmas parades are rituals. So you got icons, shrines, rituals, the Thanksgiving parade, the Christmas parade. These kind of things become rituals. And then totems. Totems are portable shrines. So people dragging trees in their house as if we needed evergreen trees to remind us of springtime in Africa. No, but we're part now of the totems, the portable shrines. And, you know, we are now past the curve. The solstice was the 21st, the shortest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere, but this is the 23rd. The sun is returning. And if you read Charles Finch's work, Echoes of the Old Darkland, I'm looking over there at his book. I'm just mentioning Finch because that's one of the first places I read it and put two and two together, thanks to Dr. Finch down there at Morehouse School of Medicine. The idea of the return of the sun, S-U-N, and the birth of the sun, S-O-N, being a metaphor for the return of the sun in many ways. The whole idea then that the day is triumphing over the night. The day will triumph over the night, the solstice, the darkest day. And now the light is returning. Metaphorically, the light is returning. Symbolically, the light is returning here. Now, of course, we'll go through the spring equinox. And at that point, the days will become longer than the nights, and the day will triumph over the night. That becomes metaphorical. And a lot of scholars will say it becomes metaphorical for the rites of spring in Europe, which give birth in some ways to the way Easter is interpreted. That's why you got rabbits and all that stuff with a man on a cross. What the hell is this? This is the triumph of day over night. The sun is triumph. But all this stuff being metaphorical, congealing in holidays, holy days, elevated days, days that bring us together as community. And social cohesion, building community, requires investments in common good. God bless ye merry gentlemen. Dickens, in the middle of just, squalor and all this, working class and working poor white people, writes these stories. A Christmas Carol. Scrooge, a Jeff Bezos figure. Scrooge, a Bill Gates figure. Scrooge, an Elon Musk figure. Yes, it's interesting new book on Elon Musk. I mean, he ain't telling you anything you already know, but, goes to sleep and gets visited by memory. I messed up his life. Gets met by the present. All the people talking crap about him, including his employee, Bob Cratchit. And then the future. The boy is dead. You lonely. Now you died and you going to hell. He wakes up. Let me give all my money away. Well, no, he ain't really give all his money away, did he? But the point is this. Dickens is writing that in a moment because the investment in the common good must be brought back. The politics of trash in England at the time that Dickens is writing. Poor people are rising up. So you got to make this illusion of this benevolent billionaire to come in. Scrooge has changed his heart because Christmas spirit is in everybody's heart. But at any rate, in fact, I was just talking to one of my friends who the Washington Post just sent out another encouragement, a buyout offer to about 800 people. And apparently about maybe a third of those people took it. They laying off people. Bezos is cutting back. I said, well, this is a boutique acquisition. He don't need money from the Washington Post. Yeah, but he said people were reading it more during COVID and when Trump was president. But then once Trump wasn't reelected and the pandemic is over, they started canceling their subscriptions. It's funny how people want to be ignorant and can't pay attention. But here's the thing. Social cohesion requires investments in the common good. Absent that, things fall apart. Things fall apart. And that's what, I thought we would talk about a little bit today as we saw the New York State Reparations Commission study commission established by the governor of New York, a white woman, pushed through in partnership and at the behest of Black elected officials, an international coterie of Black elected. I loved what Senator Sanders said when he spoke. James Sanders got up and said, I want to talk a little bit. I want to thank my sharecropper father, my domestic mother. He said, we escaped terror. We escaped government that was persecuting us. We escaped the dangers. He said, I am a first generation immigrant. I'm from the South. And I was like, yeah, brother, that's what I'm talking about. See, what y'all gonna stop doing is separating Black people based on where they came out of their mother's wombs. I don't give a damn where we came out of. Reparations should only be for the descendants of the enslaved. Somebody was enslaved everywhere. And things fall apart when we don't build social cohesion. This brother said, I'm an immigrant. I'm an immigrant to New York. My parents fled the South. I'm a first generation immigrant. I said, yes, you are, brother. Because place should not determine our social cohesion as a people and our governance formations. Now, that Tuesday morning, we witnessed something emerging as a commonplace act. Reparations used to be something that was only talked about in communities that I know I and a lot of people here are very close to, the Black nationalists and the Pan-Africanist communities. That's where it was talked about. Queen Mother Ali Moore and Amari Abubakari Obadeli and the Republic of New Africa and the National Coalition for Blacks for Reparations in America, Conrad Worrell and so many others, Reparations Ray Jenkins and out of Joanne Watson out of Detroit. And I mean, all these folks coming together and push. And then, the literature begins to emerge. That literature that goes back to the 50s and 60s, but certainly becomes more prevalent in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Richard America or Ray Winbush with his book, Should America Pay? And so many other people writing and talking about it. But now it's popular. And by popular, I mean it's in the common parlance. But let's be clear, there's a new dimension that was added last week in the United States of America. The governor of New York, speaking for half an hour before the act was signed a bill establishing that commission. Now, that moment underscores how theoretically, remember how people talk about the United States of America, each state is a quote unquote laboratory of democracy, or as David Pepper wrote his book, Laboratories of Autocracy, because he's out of Ohio, former legislator out of Ohio. And he talks about how, yeah, we call it democracy, but it's really autocracy. I'm looking to see if I have a copy of, no, I don't have it here. I usually keep a copy near the desk, which is very interesting, of the U.S. Constitution, but I'm not going to do that right now. No need to do that. But the point is that it underscores how each state is different from the other states. Some states have more in common than other states, but ultimately each state is different. Over the last week, the reason I bring up this idea of things fall apart, and of course, things fall apart, most people will trace that and think about that phrase from Chinua Achebe and his novel, his 1957 novel, Things Fall Apart. But the actual poem that fed that novel was by William Butler Yeats. Yeats wrote that poem in 1920. And the poem's like, circling ever higher in the sky, the falcon can't hear the falconer, things fall apart, the center cannot hold. That phrase, things fall apart, of course, Achebe uses it in 1957 to talk about the devastating effects of colonialism as the British invade West Africa and his people, Igbo people, things fall apart. The white man, and here's the phrase from the novel, the white man has put a knife on the thing that held us together and now it's falling apart. Well, things are falling apart in the settler crime called the United States of America. And if we use our Africana Studies framework, we see things falling apart in real time, but we are so close to it that we might not be able to recognize not only how things are falling apart, but how we can seize the moment, seize the time, to borrow from the Black Panthers, seize the time to create not only better circumstances for ourselves, but better circumstances for the people around us and the society out of our governance formations. That's what I heard over and over in the formal and informal conversations that we were all having on Tuesday in New York at the New York Historical Society. This moment we're in underscores how each state is theoretically a place where that can happen. Each locality is a place where that can happen. Over the last week, the Colorado Supreme Court ruled Donald Trump violated the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And the Supreme Court of the United States is forced to take interpretive action. I love it. You go tear your funky place up, Johnny John, John Boy, baby, John Roberts. John, you're finished. Because you can't punt this one. Y'all saw yesterday, it's today's New York Times, justices defer issue of Trump and immunity. Supreme Court declined on Friday to decide for now whether former President Donald J. Trump is immune from prosecution on charges of plotting to overturn the 2020 election. Because Trump's lawyers are arguing, I was the president, I was doing it as president, so therefore you can't prosecute me. John Boy don't want no part of that. Now, onward Christian soldier, Sam Alito, and the wholly owned subsidiary of the Koch brothers and everybody else with $1 billion, that would be, of course, Uncle Clarence Thomas, and his insurrectionist wife, Jenny, they want nothing more than to get a hold of the case. But what they're doing is tearing up the law. Things fall apart. John Boy worried about rule of law, worried about frameworks and structures, and he should be worried because the Supreme Court is increasingly showing itself to be illegitimate. Not that it was ever legitimate to people of African descent, but I want to contrast where we are today with this Colorado Supreme Court case. I mean, Section 3, which was I was going to read verbatim, but I don't see my copy. And, you know, during COVID, when I was teaching from here, I kept a copy of the Constitution here for my law class. And by the way, oh, here. I know y'all think that I'll be doing this on purpose, but I don't. Here go a copy of the Constitution. Let's just read the 14th Amendment, Section 3, so that we all know what we're talking about. But I've been working on, in fact, between now and next week, I'm putting the finishing touches on this syllabus. Our colleague who normally teaches the critical race theory class at Howard is on sabbatical. So they asked me just for this spring to teach the critical race theory class. Oh, am I looking forward to that? Can you imagine? What a blessing. What a fellowship. What a peace of mind. Anyway, leaning on every last, I'm going to teach out of that critical race theory class. Those students sign up for that class. Oh, we about to do something ain't nobody ever seen. You want to talk about CRT? Oh, we're going to talk about CRT. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, Section 3, no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. Oh, I love it. You see what this is? This is called the Constitution of the United States of America. You can also read it as trash if the words don't mean nothing. This is what John Roberts worried about. This is what John Boy worried about. If somebody gonna say this is trash, I'm sorry, that somebody else is going, that enough people will say, because I'm gonna tell you who says it's trash, but who always holding it up. That's the white nationalists. It's trash if it don't do what they want it to do. It's a brand new book on the Second Amendment. I just started reading. It's very interesting, the history of the Second Amendment, its English roots, this kind of thing. But at the end of the day, how we interpret the Constitution of the United States of America isn't about what's written in the document. It's about how the judges interpret it. This is where I'm going with this. So the Colorado Supreme Court, in a plain language reading of this document, Section 3, what we just read, said Donald Trump can't be on the ballot in the state of Colorado because the responsibility of conducting federal elections falls to the states. So the feds can't come in and run the state election, except when they want to, which was, you know, why they told Florida they had to stop counting in Bush versus Gore, a trash opinion. But this coming Supreme Court term, I got to talk to Angie Porter about this because I think we might have to do a special session on this, get the legal roundtable together again. Because this special section, you think Bush versus Gore was controversial? Oh, the coming spring in the Supreme Court, Donald Trump said, I'm president. I do what the hell I want. Rule on it. Supreme Court was like, hell no. It's got to go through the appeals process, which means what? It's going to be held at the D.C. Circuit. I just passed D.C. Circuit Courthouse yesterday on my way back up here. So they punted to the lower courts. But this Colorado case comes straight to them. Does a plain language reading of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution mean what it says? If the answer is yes, Donald Trump is off the ballot in Colorado, and other states will follow. I think Maine is teeing up to have this conversation one by one. And see, it's all fun and games on states' rights until it's states' rights applied to your insurrectionist, white nationalist, fascist friend. Now you got a problem. Wednesday's New York Times. Let me see if I got Wednesday's Times here, because I took it out of my bag. Was this no, this is hold on. Give me a second. Yeah. Many voters see criminality but support Trump anyway. Meaning what? They don't care. Ain't no rule of law. It's only white supremacy. So if you say rule or ruin, we don't care. But guess what? If enough people say they don't care, John Boy ain't got no authority. So this is where federalism is tested. And guess what? When it's been tested before, this is Browder versus Gale. In fact, that's so funny. Children's books. This just came out. In fact, I was at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I like going down there a few times a month when I can get away, just to spend a couple of hours down there. Nice reminder to hear the people, hear the conversations, and also to spend some time in the bookstore, see if there's anything that I haven't seen, which is very rare that it's not. But I hadn't seen this one. They're getting the memo, y'all. Here, this is a new like graphic novel, children's book, graphic. I like the layout. Rosa Parks and Claudette Colvin, civil rights heroes. Okay, Tracy Baptiste and Shauna Grant. I ain't mad at y'all. Very nice. Very nice. But I'm bringing this up because, of course, we know that young teenager Claudette Colvin, who still walks the earth, of course, Mrs. Parks, now ancestor, they're at the heart of, particularly Claudette Colvin and the other sisters whose families allowed them to join in the lawsuit that Fred Gray, who still walks the earth, filed, Browder versus Gale. You're testing the 14th Amendment. Is segregation legal on this segregated bus lines in Montgomery by the United States Constitution? You're violating the 14th Amendment, and the Supreme Court agreed with them. This is also at the heart. In other words, these local struggles triggered national questions that the court weighed in on the side of the angels. Alabama versus King, New York Times versus Sullivan. All those cases coming out of Montgomery, Alabama. We're going to spend some time in Montgomery next year. I'm just putting that in the universe. So everybody start thinking about Montgomery. I put them energies out there: Montgomery, Alabama, Atlanta, Georgia, Orangeburg, South Carolina. Start putting them energies out there, because we need to spend some time out there. We're gonna do some work in those spaces, just being in community with the people there and linking that together and stitching them together. But this is where federalism is tested, because things are falling apart. You see, in that period, it was in the United States foreign policy interest to have things stay together. The recalcitrant South, understand? The South and the white nationalists all over the country that supported the South. One of the things that was very interesting listening to these conversations, these speeches that were at the New York Reparations Commission bill signing on Tuesday. A couple of people brought this up. It might have been Senate Majority Leader Stuart Cousins who brought it up. Maybe the governor brought it up as well. I have to go back and look at it. And by the way, if y'all want to see the signing, it's on Governor Hochul's YouTube page. You can see the whole thing. But somebody brought up the fact that that New York, a lot of people brought it up. Maybe Al Sharpton too. Actually, now I'm thinking about it. The city of New York and New York State was very much divided on the question of enslavement. They had the largest population of enslaved people in the region. They were the financial center for the criminal enterprise nationally. They became a global player in this, and now arguably the most important city in the global economy of the criminal enterprise, called settler colonialism and the modern world system. And then for enslavement, and I remember this wasn't discussed on Tuesday, but I was sitting there thinking about this. I don't know whether it was Leslie Harris, my friend Leslie Harris, or there was another book, Slavery in New York. Well, the conversation was this: when South Carolina seceded from the Union, at some point, some of the white people in New York City went to the mayor of New York City and told the mayor of New York City that you need to go to Albany to the governor of New York and say that New York, the state, must secede from the Union along with those southern states. Why? Do you know how much cotton and indigo and tobacco? Do you know how much that we ship sugarcane? You know how much we ship out of New York ports? At the same time, the Confederacy was like, F New York, we're going to make Charleston into New York. We'll run everything out of there. At the same time, the French and the English is like, we're going to see who wins the war. And if the South wins, we'll just do business out of Charleston. New York was at an existential crisis. So this wasn't just a regional thing. Oh, old times there were not forgotten. I'm sure you all saw the news in the last few days about Arlington National Cemetery. I've spit on that. I'm sorry. I've paid my respects many times on the Confederate monument that is there, the Confederate Soldiers Monument that is there, a stone's throw from the Buffalo Soldiers plaque that was laid when Colin Powell was in the federal government. But this big ass Confederate monument that they were on the verge of getting rid of, and then people cried bloody murder, including some of the insurrectionists who are still in the federal legislature. And so they said, okay, we're going to back up off it for now. Yeah, you're not going to get rid of that monument. That monument with black women and men etched in bronze, following behind these funky ass Confederate fascists, enemies of our common humanity. You're not going to get rid of it. But anyway, the point I'm bringing is this. When listening to them about the relationship of white nationalism on a countrywide level, it wasn't just the South. In other words, New York State was in it too. This is why this New York Reparations Commission is going to be a little different. It's going to have Africans from all over the world who have come to New York, who live in New York and the state, who live in the city, who are going to be at these public hearings. It's going to be very interesting. I think this American descendant of enslavement, which I absolutely understand. I'm descended from those who were enslaved in this country. So I absolutely understand the pain, the trauma, the desire. That's got to be met with rational, logical thinking, structural reforms, because the state of New York can do some things that California can't do, that Illinois can't do at a statewide level. So if you put a floor under education, if you put a floor under healthcare, if you put a floor under employment, if you put a floor under attacking visceral attacks, I saw on the front page of the Times today, the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, talking about, trying to bribe city council people to push his pro-police agenda. But if you can push back on that structurally and everybody benefits, that does not resolve the existential question of how do we repair ourselves who were enslaved in the United States. However, it creates a material benefit that all can benefit from, and you just got to let go some of this idea that your hurt is only your hurt. And I'm gonna restrict myself and calm my tongue as I hear Jacob Carruthers in my head saying good speech, and stop myself from being too critical of this descendant of slavery conversation, this foundational Black American conversation this morning, because this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are, wherever we are in the world, because I understand it's coming from pain. I do understand that. And it's a very personal thing. And there's probably nobody in the ADOS movement, or however you want to label it, FBA, there's nobody who knows any more than I do about the intimate, very specific details of how that pain emerged. But we've got to understand that in that pain, we cannot become figments of other people's imaginations. We have to turn to each other. But federalism is being tested in the social structure of the United States of America as part of a global network as well. And each previous cycle that federalism has been tested up until now, the country moved toward a different iteration. Kermit Roosevelt, when we talked about his book, The Nation That Never Was, where he says basically the United States was founded after the Civil War with the Reconstruction Amendments. Richard Kreitner's book, Break It Up, and Prof, you talked to Richard Kreitner, and I did as well. Kreitner saying, the key theme in the United States history is separation, not coming together. It's almost fallen apart several times. One of the things that keeps it together is foreign policy, the idea of a common enemy. But guess what? That's getting fragile too in a world system. The 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, a key amendment talking about citizenship and this kind of thing, has been on a course of judge-made evisceration since the retreat from racial democracy and Reconstruction that began in earnest. They've been retreating from the 14th Amendment since the 1880s, the slaughterhouse cases, the civil rights cases. No time to talk about that this morning. We're going to kind of wrap this up in a minute. It's on the eve of Christmas Eve. But the point is that it isn't in the language of the Constitution. It's in how judges interpret the language. And what you have now is a white nationalist federal bench that has been stoked because of a white nationalist insurance policy written into the document called the Electoral College that has allowed a shrinking white nationalist minority to exercise outsized power. But that too is being tested now as things fall apart. The Wisconsin Supreme Court 2 days ago ruled that you got to redraw the legislative lines in the state of Wisconsin. It was a 5-4 vote. The fifth vote was this white woman, Prosiewicz, who was put on the court as a result of election in Wisconsin, Democrat. You see, I always talking about Democrats. No, we talking about power. Your lips, seal them. Open your eyes and ears. Read, study, now unseal, and let's talk. And trust me, TD Jakes and Diddy, not going to save you. Sexy Red, not going to save you. You can't eat what's going on the Real House Husbands or Real Housewives or whatever else reality things going on. You can't eat the color purple. You have better chance brewing some purple hibiscus leaves tea, wouldn't you, Dr. Amin, than that. But don't go for the distractions. As John Clark say, don't get mad, get smart. Let's think about that. So that Wisconsin Supreme Court, 5-4, and guess what? The white nationalists in the legislature, the super majority in the Wisconsin state legislature that would want to have a recall and get rid of her. Well, if you recall this judge at this point, first of all, you can't because you passed the December 1st timeline. Stupid people. Anyway, but even if you did, the governor of the state of Wisconsin is Tony Evans is a Democrat, and he could appoint somebody that would be on the bench to the 2030s at this point. But I'm saying this is not a battle you're going to win with just presidential elections. You've got to see it state and local politics and how it plays. But this is another state trying to claw back its thing. You saw what happened in Michigan a couple of weeks ago. Lieutenant Governor of Michigan is a black dude. Gretchen Whitmer signed into law legislation passed through both houses, signed by law, that when you have been incarcerated, when you get out of jail, when you get out of prison, your voting rights are automatically restored. Michigan's going to be hard to claw back, even as the mummy does his best to lose the Muslim vote and anybody who is in solidarity with anyone who is like, stop the killing, by what his foreign policy in Palestine. Although he didn't send his errand boys over there, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the chair is black. The Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, is black. Austin over there, they living basically in Tel Aviv and Cairo, Tony Blinken all over there trying to get these people. And now, they done sent Lloyd Austin, the black Secretary of Defense over there. Hey, man, y'all got to stop all this damn bombing. What the hell is going on? Because guess what? You've lost the world, sir. You've lost the world. Diversity, equity, inclusion has limits. Having black faces in high places is one thing. But anyway, Michigan, Wisconsin, Colorado. There's nothing in the United States Constitution that supports Donald Trump being able to run for office. And there are states where their courts are going to say, you are off the ballot. Colorado has been the first. And John, baby. Nowhere to run, baby. Nowhere to hide. So John Roberts right now, I'm sure he is, pissed his pants several times, is now going to look for some cover. But see, they can't rule 5-4 or 6-3. The Christian Soldier, the wholly owned subsidiary, the Handmaid, these are, white nationalists, one in blackface. They are chomping at the bit. Maybe the Christian Soldier and the wholly owned subsidiary. Maybe not Comey Barrett. Beer Kavanaugh, maybe not. Gorsuch, they quoted Gorsuch. You remember Gorsuch was on federal bench out there in Colorado. The Colorado State Supreme Court quoted Neil Gorsuch in their opinion. They basically daring him to overturn their ruling. Oh, so John Boy got a problem. You can't be 6-3 on this, baby. Yeah, this ain't Bush versus Gore. This is explosive. Because it's clear in there, they passed that amendment, the 14th Amendment, as Kermit Washington writes about, as one person who I know he ain't gonna get her vote, or at least I don't know anything. I can't imagine how he gonna get the sister who is emerging as the defender of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, and that is Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson. I don't see how he gonna get Ketanji Brown Jackson to go along, but If it's 9-0, then he got a Brown versus Board moment. But if it's 9-0, that you can be a whole ass insurrectionist and still run for office, you just eviscerated the rest of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. And unlike the 1960s, you have now ensured that things gonna fall apart, because now nobody cares what it says, because it don't mean nothing. It's all politics. And you can stand there, John Roberts, with your little upside down smile that you always, you know, we have to respect the courts. Dude, I can read. My 6-year-old read this and she said that this is some bullshit. And what did you say? It's not. And she said, make your argument. And then you twisted yourself into a pretzel, probably the one that will go along with him before any of the rest of them. It won't be Sotomayor. It won't be Ketanji Brown Jackson. It'll be Kagan, Obama's pick. Oh, yeah, I come for your boy Obama every single day, twice on Sunday, 50 times on Sunday. I sat through a little podunk. Anyway, let me not do that. I'm going to leave the chocolate wonder alone today. The point is this. It'll probably be Kagan if he can get anybody. But I don't see how he going to get Brown Jackson. It might be 8-1. Because the point is that whether you're going to win or not, you still got to put a marker down for the brighter coming day. To quote Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. This week, the shovel-mouthed bastard governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, ordered more, quote-unquote, illegal immigrants deported, I think this time to Chicago, signed this law. He's got a law queued up called a special session of the Texas legislature, them white nasties down there, to create state immigration force to deport people. Things fall apart. Texas want to start doing the federal government's role. It's going to be in the courts. And can the federal bench decide that Texas can't just have its own immigration policy? But here's something people probably know, but I don't know how I'm going to get through this book while I'm working on this critical race theory book, but I can't put this book down. This is Kevin Kinney's book, new book, The Problem of Immigration in a Slave-Holding Republic. I hadn't seen this book. When I was in New York, and shout out to my girl, Stephanie Joy Tisdale, just defended her dissertation proposal. She's using the Africana Studies framework to apply to HBCU teaching and pedagogical practices, as they would call it in the academy. That's my girl. That's I know I've had Stephanie since she was a student at Howard, Philly. She's at the Center for Black Educator Development, ran Freedom Schools for us, helped run Freedom Schools for years. Just a beautiful sister, brilliant. We had her dissertation proposal defense on Tuesday. I zoomed in from New York. And let me pause here just for 30 seconds and say, this young brother, I was sitting in a Starbucks. I had to find some place to quickly jump on Zoom. So I'm there and, read the proposal. We're having the defense, answering questions. I finished. I closed my iPad, and the brother sitting next to me, young brother, he said, you at Temple? Because he could see the Temple background in the Zoom. I said, I went to school there. He said, oh, yeah? I said, yeah, and I had my earphones, so he couldn't hear us talking. He said, what were y'all doing? So I was explaining to him what we were doing, and I'm very excited about this work. Stephanie's she's applying the framework. It's opening up possibilities. But of course, since the university is jailbroken, black, white, or otherwise, what we're doing here obviously is ahead of that, but she's bringing it into that peripheral university space. I've gone on more than 30 seconds, so let me wind this up. The brother said, oh, well, that's interesting. So we started talking. He starts telling me about, he's got a Bible open, and I see him writing. And I've spent a lot of time in train stations and bus stations and in places where you have people and you see, how sometimes you see somebody and they got a stack of newspapers and they writing, and you see the little writing and they got page after page and they're written all up in the margins of the newspaper, and then they got pages they writing, and then they're writing on the back of envelopes or cardboard, and you think to yourself, something is going on. But see, I identify with them people because they're before the grace of God. In fact, what am I saying? They're before the grace? That's me. I'm always scribbling on something, right? So I know. So we talking. Turns out this young man, I said, where you from? He said, I'm from Augusta, Georgia. Professor Adams, Kathy used to teach at Payne College. So I said, oh, Payne College. I have a dear friend who taught there for years. He said, yeah, I know Payne College. I said, what you doing up here? Professor Hunter, everybody. You know what this young guy said to me? By appearance, and I didn't push him because then I was moving on to the next thing, but we talked for maybe about 10 minutes. I didn't push him about his circumstances, but it looked like he had everything he owned with him. The bags, had a duffel bag or something, had unpacked while I was sitting there in the defense. He's sitting right next to me. He's unpacked, he got his papers out. He took a pizza box. I watched him carefully out the corner of my eye, fold the pizza box down, take the lid off the pizza box, turn on the back, and start writing. He had written a poem while we sitting there. You know what that young boy said to me? He said, I left Augusta, Georgia. He said, I left Augusta about 2 weeks ago. I said, why? He said, it's time for a change. I said, so what you doing up here? He said, I like New York. I come in a place like this, I'm thinking, I just write. And I thought to myself, I want a world where you can do that and not worry about we got to sleep at night. I know he wasn't 30 years old. But anyway, so I left there, I made a few stops, and I was in the bookstore, and I saw this book, The Problem of Immigration in a Slave-Holding Republic, Policing Mobility in the 19th Century United States. This is Kevin Kinney's new book. I'm just going to read to you from the dust jacket. Today, the United States considers immigration a federal matter. Yet, despite America's reputation as a, quote, nation of immigrants, the Constitution is silent on the admission, exclusion, and expulsion of foreigners. So any policy, any federal policy on immigration comes from enabling legislation, Immigration and Nationalization Act of 1965. But what this book is tracing is the fact that there's nothing in the Constitution that says you got to keep people out. This is a state issue. And so when this shovel-mouthed bastard governor of Texas, this white nationalist, with his settler colonial republic, which they cling to like a child, their holidays, their rituals and icons and shrines in Texas, the republic, the Lone Star Republic, that was forced to be a state because Santa Ana was like, we can cut your whole head off, baby, and show it to you. That state now wants its own police force to stop people, and the federal government say you can't do that. What he's saying is there was a time when people wanted people. There were no laws restricting people, and he's tying to enslavement. Well, I'll talk more about that later as I get through it. But I'm bringing this up to say, because there's nothing in the United States Constitution that speaks to immigration, illegal or otherwise, the laws that have been passed are connected to language that doesn't explicitly deal with immigration, but citizenship. The 14th Amendment, birthright citizenship, and Martha Jones and them have written about. The reparations issue raises the specter of nativism. The idea that the only people who should get reparations in the United States of America are those who were enslaved here is ironically not tied to the 14th Amendment, as people would purport. Because remember, the 14th Amendment extends citizenship. Supposed to cure the flaw of Dred Scott, but that's a story for another day. We've talked about that too. But it's tied to an animating idea that's more, in my mind, insidious, and it's not directly involved those in the settler colonial experience. What is tied to the idea that only people who were enslaved here should get it is tied to the idea that only people who were involved in the criminal enterprise, enslaved or not, should get the largesse of the criminal enterprise. So applying our Africana Studies category framework, conceptual category framework, that raises a question. When does citizenship accrue full investment in both the benefit and the trauma of the experience of Africans? I'm raised this when they had the 1619 Project debut down in at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. When does citizenship become the gold standard of humanity? When does that become the gold standard? And if it is the gold standard of humanity, then when you have something like the state of New York, where you've got a polyglot, a multi-ethnic state, a multinational state in one city, much less the state, where you've got Africans from all over the world now colliding in New York from all parts of the United States. A lot of immigrants from the South, like Senator Sanders. A lot of people like Assemblywoman Salages, who people came from the Caribbean, now and working together to build a different structure. To be a different structure. That's what the governor was talking about. We got to come up with a different structure. And that's what Sanders was saying. We're going to build something different in that process. And then you got people coming in saying, no, only you, only you, only you. Your mouth, just for a minute. Close it and think. You got to think. Because, you don't consider the trauma of Africans who are indistinguishable from other Africans based on how we are all viewed by the social structure. Shout out to Shay Moss and her mom. Rudy Giuliani filed for bankruptcy this week. It ain't gonna save you. You're gonna pay them black women. But the trauma in that when you got people doxing and them and calling her grandbaby and messing up. I mean, you're lucky nobody beat your ass. Rudy ain't even the one. Sure, he's the one. He's the aider and the better. He's the fire starter. But the rest of these anonymous hillbilly hordes messing with these sisters is a problem. But let's just think about it, man. Rudy Giuliani. You've never been America's mayor. Hell, go there right now. If you want to call this man a mayor of anything, if you're from New York, Professor, y'all know we talked about that before. Abner Louima, Patrick Dorismond, were they not assaulted in Dorismond's case? Was he not killed? Are they not sons of the Caribbean? Are they not also black? Stop playing with our people. Nativism does not consider the interrelatedness of the global system and how solidarity politics is the most effective way to win concessions. The most effective, we just saw it on display in New York. These Africans come from all over. They're in the state assembly and they saying, we're going to do this. We're going to force this government to do that. Look at what happens when you have solidarity politics. It's the anti-apartheid movement. It's the current anti-genocide movement taking place in Palestine, raising global awareness and action around human rights abuses. It doesn't matter that the ambassador to the United Nations and her deputy ambassador are both black, putting their hand up and vetoing UN resolutions at the Security Council, or at best abstaining from weak resolutions like what happened yesterday. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if domestic politics, which focus too many African people on diversity, equity, and inclusion as some kind of damn goal, you're taking place in a place that is related to the rest of these criminals around the world. And guess what? Things are falling apart globally in the governance category. This kind of thinking stokes anti-solidarity politics by saying them people don't like us anyway. Does Michele Salages not like you, whose people immigrated from Haiti and who fights for all of us in the New York State Assembly? Are you discounting how United States foreign policy is shaped by domestic politics? Because when you get involved, I'll give you an example. Now I'm kind of winding to a conclusion now. I was talking with a friend the other day, good brother. He and his wife live here in the DC area. This brother from Guyana. He was telling me about the recent election. Guyana, there's a big fight now. Well, it's been a fight for a long time. In Western Guyana, about the western half of the country, Essequibo, is very oil rich. And Venezuela claims that it's really Venezuela. But that has been going back. There's a long article in the New York Times a couple of days ago about how the United States came in on the side of the dictator guy in Venezuela when he first made that claim. So every politician in Venezuela at some point wants to reclaim that or claim it, depending on which side of you're on. But how many of us knew that the Congressional Black Caucus, members of the Congressional Black Caucus, been down to Guyana twice in the last few months? In September, Hakeem Jeffries and Yvette Clarke, Stephen Hortsford, Maxine Waters, they went down there to meet with the president of Guyana, who's with the PPP, Progressive People's Party, and Ali, I think is his last name. And they met with him on U.S. Guyana cooperation, but they want the oil. The United States wants the oil, but it's foreign policy, right? Well, they came back down there last month in November because the Afro-Guyanese were like, yo, they down here abusing us. This PPP, there's a lot of anti-black sentiment among the Indian politicians down there. And the history of Guyana, it's a very complicated conversation. Kamani Nahusi, my man Kamani Nahusi, run a long history of Guyana. And of course, Walter Rodney is from Guyana. We talked about Walter Rodney at length, killed by Drexel Burnham, who ends up moving left, having solidarity with Cuba and everything, but he's responsible for the death of Walter Rodney. They did an inquest and showed all that. So the United States is involved in all this on all sides, but they don't want the progressives to take over in Guyana. And the guy they got down there now is in line with the United States. And when the Congressional Black Caucus members who are not from Guyana came from the United States, the one that's got the thumb on the scale for places like Exxon, wanting that oil there in Western Guyana, to say, hey, how y'all treating black people? The president of Guyana that second time wouldn't even meet with them. But as the brother is telling me this, and I knew some of this politics, but I'm loving listening to people who are from these places, who are in those places. We're having this conversation. This is what he says to me. He says, what the government is doing now in Guyana, they're waiting for the next election in the United States because they want Trump to come back in. because Trump will be the thug that will keep them in power, because when he was in last time, they subverted the election that put this guy Ali in power, because there was a coalition of Afro-Guyanese, some Indian Guyanese, and others who said this thing got to change. We got to clean this whole structure out. But the ones that Trump and them were backing, they sent Mike Pompeo to Guyana. Remember the pompous ass Mike Pompeo, the one who was supposed to be president? We ain't seen him running for nothing. He sent him down there to threaten the Guyanese. And of course, Rex Tillerson had been there before Pompeo, and that's Exxon, that's oil and gas. They want that oil, and they need a partner to play ball. If we're going to talk about Black advancement in the United States of America as something that is sealed by the four corners of this funky criminal set, the state, then we have missed the point, because nobody in the world plays with those boundaries except us. And for us, to quote our brother Mike Harriet, who in his latest column, talking about whether DC is in the South, said that white lines matter, I'm going to remix that and say white lines don't matter, because white lines is what's keeping us apart. So I'm going to end with this. I think on a day, today is the 23rd of December. This is the birthday of Sheikh Anta Diop. It's the 23rd. He's born December 23rd, 1923. It's 12/23/23 in Jorbel, Senegal. In fact, our brother Mario Beatty, as we speak, is headed to Dakar for the 100th anniversary celebration. They've been trying to get me to Dakar. It's the second time I ain't go. I said, nah, I'm gonna sit here for a minute. Yeah, I get 5 minutes to breathe, and I'm gonna take all 5 of them because I need them. I would love to have gone, but his son Sheikh Mbaki is gonna be there. Tifalo Benga will probably come up from the Congo. They're gonna have a mini conference. I'm sure Mario will share the streaming link. I think there's going to be a streaming component, and in Nubia, for folks who are in Nubia, in the conversation. And Sheikh Anta Diop, arguably, in fact, at the World Conference of Black Writers, it was 1956, they named Sheikh Anta Diop and W.B. Du Bois the two most important Black thinkers of the first half of the 20th century. I don't even think I would dispute that. But I think about that in the context of a sister like Dr. Claudine Gay at Harvard, John McWhorter, serving as he always does as a loyal field hand to power, writing in the New York Times yesterday, said that she should resign, this Black man, that she had plagiarized. And yes, it might be minor on the scale of plagiarism, but it still speaks to integrity. Reminds us that that stuff don't matter to us. That train has shipped. We have jailbroken the university. We are doing the thing here. We don't want anything to happen to her. We don't want anything, but understand Harvard's irrelevant to us. It's as relevant as John McWhorter makes this point. He says people who write these academic books and journal articles, they're doing it for advancement in the academy, and it's all important. And Dr. Gay only has 11 articles, and she's only got one book, and it's a co-authored book with different co-edited books. So she has a thin resume compared to the other presidents. Guess what? All that, you can have that conversation, is not a problem. Because we are also in the season of the birth of Yosef Ben Yakinen and Chancellor Williams. And on January the 1st, our brother, the man, John Henry Clark. Dr. Clark got a PhD at 78 years old from Pacific Western University, then unaccredited, now the accredited California Miramar University, but it doesn't matter. Dr. Clark used to tell this story all the time. He said, you know, I have given more PhDs and trained more PhDs than I can count. And I myself didn't have a degree. So one day, one of my students said, you've done so much, you've written so much, you've taught so many. Why don't you just go ahead and get the paper? And so I decided I'd go ahead. So I wrote something up and I took the degree. People might say, oh, that's from an uncredited college. I'll end with this. I have an elder who I won't name, very, very close to Sterling Brown, the great Sterling Brown, who didn't have a PhD, but was arguably the most important master teacher to ever work at Howard University, and one of the most important master teachers to ever work at any university anywhere. And Sterling Brown was often disrespected, often by people with more degrees and prestige, and they often trashed him. But the elder was telling me one day, we were talking about Sterling Brown, and you know, I had a lot of respect for Sterling Brown, obviously. And he said, you know, He says Sterling Brown thought PhDs were disguises for people who weren't knowledgeable. He didn't see the point in getting one. And I think in this season, as we're thinking about things falling apart, this gives us an opportunity to remember the things that are important. PhDs aren't important. Degrees aren't important. What's important is that we build the structures that enable us to wield power. And that's what Dr. Clark said. And education should enable a people to become responsible wielders of power. And that's what we can remember in this season.
Mm. Yes, all of that. I appreciate it. Everything. Well, today was a full meal. And I want folk to also, because we're going to be building systems. I have Pam Keith coming into Nubia or to help put together this think tank, the Onyx Society, so that we can start to build the levers of power internally, so that we can start to run people for office that will do the things that need to be done. All of the talk around reparations, I keep telling folk, what's your plan for getting it?
Right.
It's going to be through legislation. How do you get legislation passed? You have to elect people. So no tangibles, no vote is a backwards way of looking at it. It's no vote, no tangibles. So we have to be intentional about who we put in the office. If the goal is reparations for whether it's descendant of Africans or all people, just setting the framework as they're doing in New York, so that there can be some leveling of the playing field or some, tipping of the pendulum, so that people can have more rights and more freedoms and more power. That can only happen when we have legislators, which are elected. Reparations ain't just going to come down like manna from heaven. So,
I see here somebody in the YouTube chat says, when asked, CARICOM responded that their reparations cases for the members of the Caribbean, and that we should reference our organizations within our country. Yeah, that's right. Also, I'm sure that you are well aware, of course, for making that statement, you're well aware of Hillary McBeckles, who's the chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, also a professor at the University of West Indies, who is not only in solidarity with the U.S. reparations movement, but also a member of a number of reparations formations. I've been with him on many occasions, who actually testified to the United States Congress. Don't mistake the idea of looking for venues and parties to drag into any form of international law or court with somehow being nativist. These are two different things. Yeah. So these are, and that's why we have to have strategy and plot together. The nativism element of this descendant of slavery is not only illogical, it won't get us what we want. You can't, and that's why I think New York is so important, Prof, because New York has never been a nativist place. You can't be a nativist in New York City. It's impossible. This is going to be very different in California. I can't wait for these public hearings. In fact, I suspect over the arc of the next year, you're probably going to be in conversation with some of these people who are on the, as you have them on the radio.
Yeah, Eldroy came in, on Tuesday on my radio show after after the signing, and then laid it out. And I'd like to see less, offense. Like, let's not be an offense. Right. Find your way in, like, find the commonality, find the ways that we can agree. There's not a versus, anybody with black skin anywhere in the world understands oppression, understands, even enslavement, we understand all of the battles. Yes, they're unique, whether you were in the Caribbean, which was brutal, or whether you were in the New World, where actually the average plantation, most white people didn't own black people, and it was like an average of 10 on a plantation, because they saw what happened in the Caribbean when it was 300. You got Haiti, you got the Maroons, so they're like, black people can't be together. So if they know our togetherness is a threat to the power structure, why are we fighting?
Well, I think a lot of it is bots and bot factories. Some of it's ignorance. And instead of most people who will argue with these people, I'm saying, I understand your pain. Why don't y'all come in Nubia? We can talk about it, or we can talk about it other venues. But what I'm not going to do, well, I'm not going to, our people been harmed. For those who legitimately, I'm not talking about the bots. I'm not talking about people trying to disrupt elections. I'm not talking about the willfully ignorant. I'm talking about people who genuinely think and believe that. I understand it. Let's have a conversation about that. Because as Marie Kelsey says, let us agree to agree. Like you said, why are you so hot? The idea, in fact, this goes to another son of the Caribbean, who I guess by this definition wouldn't be able to have reparations. And that would be Malcolm X, who asked a simple question: who taught you to hate yourself? Who taught you to hate yourself? When you come out against somebody who looks like you, who has suffered like you have suffered in a different space, and before people say, well, you know, Africans came because they sold us into slavery. Do you know that the vast majority of people of African descent own nothing? You got to study our people, the criminal Chinwezu, the rest of us, even Daniel Black in the coming. You got to deal with this fact. We're talking about building a world. We have to have the momentum of memory. Guess who will attack each other but come together against you? Bezos and the Meta guy, Zuckerberg. Guess who is laying off people at the Washington Post, keeping you ignorant, even though the paper is deeply flawed? Bezos. Guess who is going to fight until it's time to have common interests? Elon Musk. But you want to fight somebody, ain't nobody got, look, that's fine. I understand. What I'm saying is I understand. And it's okay. We're not gonna fight. You're not gonna fight me. We're not gonna fight me. We're gonna keep pouring clean glasses of water. And you can say my logic is flawed. You can say that. But of course, I think people who are listening and who are thinking independently will say that's a response out of trauma. Of course, the logic isn't flawed, but I'm not going to argue with you about that. I'm just going to say, everybody, let's pay attention. If we pay attention, it'll resolve itself.
And if you want,
mother's from Grenada. I've heard that argument that Malcolm can't get reparations because his mother's from Grenada. I'm very well aware of where Earl is from. In fact, anyway, I'm not going to get into that.
Again, that's a distraction too. So if you don't
want to be distraction, but it's also teachable moments. I don't mind that. Okay. I don't mind that.
Well, anybody that wants a clean glass of water and wants to be in a community that is everywhere, all at once, trying to figure some things out, because there's no perfect solution. I'm just trying to regain my memory.
I know that's right.
I'm in Knarrative because I want to regain my memory, and I want to be around people who are on the same page. And we don't have to agree on all things because we won't. We're human beings. We're not going to agree. But we should have a common goal, which is to regain our memory, and then we can move from there. So I just want to say thank you for bringing all of the people in your camp to the table so that we can extract, Dr. Beatty, Kat Adams coming. Hello, hi, Dr. Sunyata, and all of the folk that will be teaching, Dr. Tasha Austin. We're gonna get into some language stuff, more language stuff, and the people that I'm bringing as well. And the people that the people are bringing, because we all bringing people. That's part of the break, So thank you, and
we're all bringing. Yeah, the white stuff is there too. Roxanne Marr brought up gangs in New York. Yes, one of these days, Prof, I can't wait for the Nubia film division to be up and running, because
yes, me too. But even that is, like, to me, books are foundational. So it's the books. From the books, then we get the foundation to then be able to create the films. But I'm not just creating films out of whole cloth just because it's a good idea. There has to be some foundation.
I'm glad you said that. Let me have you you put on your schedule to go see American Novel.
Yes, it is. I'm hearing a lot about it. And our man Jeffrey Wright. Have you seen it?
No, but I'm going to see it. I think I'm going to see it today, because I mean, don't go anywhere. This is like, I remember the novel it's based on when it came out. I think I told everybody this before. I was in Atlanta. This is when Mario and Bleethy were teaching at the Atlanta University Center. Mario was Morris Brown and Bleethy was at Clark. And I went down there to see them, and my sister and brother-in-law were living down there, and my parents were down there. So I went down there. My brother-in-law was playing for the Falcons at the time. And so, me, I get the car keys, I'm going to look for books. And there used to be a bookstore on Martin Luther King Avenue where the brother, I don't know, it was Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He had all the new books for at least half price off. It was like, I don't know whether he was raiding Barnes and Noble, stuff was falling off the truck. It was glorious, especially when I had no money. So I'm buying, and I'm on my hands and knees in this place. It's just books stacked up. I'm pulling books, and I pulled this book out, and it was a picture of a dude, a little boy on the front, like 7, 8 years old, and he had a big one of them old, like, Court 45 pistols, and he had the gun to his head, and he was like smiling. I was like, what the hell is this? The Erasure was the name of the novel. And I was reading, so I opened the book and I started reading. I started laughing from the first page. I said, what? So I said, okay, I'm gonna buy this. I went back to my sister's house and I stayed up all night. I could not put that book down. That book, Erasure, by Percival Everett, who is a brilliant novel. I got a chance to meet Percival Everett many years later after I come to Howard. He came to speak, and I got a chance. I bought all this stuff, Suitor and Glyph, and I Am Not Sidney Poitier. And I mean, he's a brilliant novelist. But Erasure, that's the book this movie is based on. So if you go see this,
Okay.
the whole, I mean,
All right. All right.
you know.
Publicly, we got to do this. The Anatomy of Books by
Yes,
Dr.
yes,
Carr.
we are.
We have to do the book autopsies
Top
because
yes,
even that, like, I wouldn't have known that. So thank you. And I always want to read the book before
yes,
I watch the movie. So
yes.
I'm not gonna be able to do that now because I'm gonna go see this movie.
Yeah, you gotta go see it. I mean, but you know, Jeffrey Wright ain't gonna be in no trash if he can help. I mean,
no, that's a fact. That's
DC's own, by the way. DC's own. Shout out to him. And of course, have you seen that clip with him and Taraji talking about who's DC and that? You know. And shout out to Taraji Henson. I'm not going to go see The Color Purple. I'll watch it when it comes on streaming because I just, my thing is, and I read the book several times. Alice Walker's book, A Learned Life, is a good, well-written book. I went and saw the movie the first time. Danny Glover and all them. Adolph Caesar, of course, Whoopi Goldberg. But
Whoopi Goldberg.
Yeah, well,
Whoopi Goldberg. All right.
I'm good on The Color Purple, and I'm not trashing it. I'm just saying that, as my daddy would say, hey, with Carr, sometimes you gotta live life. You got one bullet. So if I got one movie I'm gonna see, it's gonna be an American Novel.
Okay, insane. And I was gonna go see it. I didn't. Something ain't sitting right with me. The more I'm watching the press run, and then the question came to me yesterday: who was asking for this? Like, we don't have. I mean, in the annals of all of the things that we can,
all of the things
immortalize into film, we need another version of this. Like,
I'm not mad, but
yeah, I just had the question, but it was informed by Taraji's heartfelt, emotional, powerful revelation that we've heard time and time again, and it raises a question for me. If you're in a seat of power to produce something, what is your responsibility to make sure everybody is taken care of? And I just only can judge it based on, how I move, which is how we judge most things, right? It's like, if there's money and there's value, like, don't you want to pay people what they're worth? And more importantly, if a person is asking you for what they're worth, why would you diminish them? There's some ridiculous stuff. But 20 years in the game, Taraji, come on. Give that woman the money or Viola, give the woman the money give that. I think, it's at the end of the day, and you have the power to do it because you do. Make it right. Make it make sense. It's okay. Overpay her. There's no harm being done because I feel like money in the hands of certain people will feed a village. Like,
I agree. I definitely agree. Well, although I do see Dr. Goddess, who very well, our sister out there in Western Pennsylvania, she said you should go see it because the musical is Alice Walker's full book. The first one was troubling. Did you see the musical? No, I didn't see the musical.
I saw the Broadway play. Is it the Broadway play?
Yeah, the Broadway. Yeah. The trailers. I mean, it looks sumptuous. It looks gorgeous. Like you said, maybe I will. You know what? I'm always open. Maybe I will go see it. I just feel like
it's not about support or not support.
It's not about support.
Yeah, for
sure. I mean, because it doesn't matter. They've decided that there's going to be not American novel, American fiction. Thank you, Deidre. But yeah, Doc, I appreciate that. Maybe I will go see.
There's text and subtext, and it's not about support or not support. It's about having limited amount of time. And like you said, if you have a limited amount of time, I'd rather read the book. If you have limited amount of time and you don't want to read the book and you want to go see a film, let's keep building on what we already know. I'm just saying we know this already. We know the story, right? I don't know the story of erasure, so I'm gonna do that. So.
Well, I tell you what, you're gonna laugh out loud. I mean, actually, it's interesting because Everett, his whole body of work is like this. He's not just a satirical writer. He did one on Strom Thurmond. It is hilarious.
Why isn't he a household name? Why am I just
we got thousands of people in here, over the week, thousands of people come up there, maybe 15, 20, 30,000 people gonna look. So get Percival Everett in your rotation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not mad at it, but it's interesting because and his novel Erasure is the same way, and this isn't a spoiler alert. I'm just letting y'all know he's very much in that battle that you're talking about. In other words, who's picking winners or losers? How are we being represented? And what happens when you're trying to do something that is closer to what you really thinking, but not what this industry wants? That is at the heart of erasure. So I know it's going to be at the heart of American fiction.
I just want to say one more thing.
Yes.
It's not an opportunity to bash Oprah or to bash.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Let's stop doing that too. This is, to me, anytime I bring up anybody, it's an opportunity for us to see how we can do better ourselves. Like this is a clarion call for each of us who are sitting in positions to do better for not just ourselves, for everybody. If you're a nurse and you,
I'm gonna mix ADOS and FBA because they're both nativist. But go on. I'm just mentioning that. I'm just doing that for the people. Nativism is not those letters don't mean anything. Just focus on nativism. Nativism. Read a little bit about nativism. Read about the Know Nothing parties, the 1850s. You help them a little bit. But no, ain't nobody bashing. Right. You're not bashing. I mean, hey,
God I don't want us to, it's not like, let's not jump on that bandwagon. Let people gonna do what they do. You're not changing anybody that's already doing what they're doing and they're successful doing what let them do that. But we have to show something different, in the way in which we move. Is the water murky over there? All right, here, let's pour a clean glass. Let's stop talking about the dirty water. Pour a clean glass. Let's just
clean glass. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Sherry. Sherry says Percival Everett has a new book coming out in March 2024 called James. It's a retelling of Huckleberry Finn from Jim's perspective. Yeah, that's Percival Everett. That's exactly what he did. That's what I'm saying.
I gotta get him on my to-do list.
You gotta you Percival Everett. I would love that conversation because he's a really laid back guy. He kind of quiet. Yeah, you, Percival Everett, and Walter Mosley. I would pay money to see the three of y'all sitting down having a conversation with me. Anyway,
2024. All right, yes. I love you so much.
Love you too.
Happy whatever y'all celebrate, and merry and be in love with one another.
No question.
That's it. All right, Dr. Carr.
Yeah.